Warning: this video contains spoilers for endings H and B. In Black Souls 2, if you're playing without the Hollow status effect, nightmare spirits can spawn in certain areas of the map. The vast majority of these are based on real-life serial killers or other infamous historical figures. I showed their design, dialogue, and even gameplay. This video series will compile each nightmare spirit, their real-life counterpart, and any details that tie the two together. Enjoy! The first nightmare spirit the player is likely to encounter is Ketch the Executioner, found in the Rabbit Hole. He is based on English executioner Jack Ketch, who was employed by King Charles II and was known for just sucking shit at executing people. His most infamous being the executions of the Duke of Monmouth and Lord William Russell. The latter took 5 blows to chop off his head. The former actually tipped Ketch in advance. This was a common thing for aristocrats sentenced to death to do at the time, in order to bribe their executioner to give them a swifter, cleaner death. Ketch, however, missed the Duke's head and struck the side of his head instead. The Duke of Monmouth then insulted his own executioner's skills by yelling, and I quote, "You dog, did I give you 10 guineas to use me so inhumanely?" Allegedly, the source of this quote is a pamphlet, The Apology of John Ketch, Esquire, the author of which is still subject to debate by historians whether it's Ketch himself or some random twat making shit up to sell to the papers. This is why the nightmare spirit Ketch bemoans people calling his executions botched in a comically British accent. Upon defeat, he drops the butcher's great axe, since, well, I mean, he should have butchered those executions, am I right? Yeah. Moving on to Lutwich Town, Frederick of Fear will attack you if you enter a certain back alley. Frederick takes his namesake from British serial killer Fred West, who, along with his wife Rosemary, murdered at least 10 young women between 1973 and 1987, including their own stepdaughter. Rose isn't present in-game, but is mentioned in his dialogue. His dialogue also has further references to the pair's crimes, as well as being serial killers. They also sexually abuse many young girls, including their own daughters. When Heather West, their stepdaughter, disclosed her sexual abuse to a friend at school, she was murdered by Fred, her remains buried in the family's back garden. After her death, her sisters were threatened that if they tried to escape or speak up about the abuse they suffered, they would end up under the patio like their sister. Fred and Rose were eventually brought to justice in 1994, when 2 years prior, their daughter Louise confided in a friend that she'd been raped by her father. While the charges of sexual abuse were eventually dropped after Fred's daughter refused to testify against them out of fear, the police soon turned their attention to the disappearance of Heather, Fred's previous wife Rena, and daughter Charmaine. A search warrant was executed on the 23rd of February 1994, and the remains of 7 girls, including Heather, was found buried on their property. Fred committed suicide in prison in 1995 while Rose is still alive serving a life sentence. Given the incestuous nature of his real-life counterpart's crimes, mid-battle Frederick of Fear alludes to the true nature of the Covenants, or ending B, saying to Grimm, "It feels good to rape your own daughter, right?" Alluding to the fact that most of the girls you form covenants with are in fact Grimm's daughters, mass-produced with Node throughout each cycle. If you choose to enter the mental ward on the west side of Lutwich Town, in one of the rooms you can encounter Dark Dr. Harold. Harold takes his namesake from the most prolific serial killer in Britain, Harold Shipman. While working as a GP, Harold murdered at least 250 women by lethal injection. He would target elderly patients during home visits, administering lethal doses of diamorphine, or heroin. On 7th of September in 1998, Shipman was arrested, and on January 31st, 2000, he was found guilty on 15 counts of murder and sentenced to life. He hung himself in his cell 4 years later. In reference to his real-life counterpart's modus operandi, Dark Dr. Harold's attacks can inflict multiple status effects, including poison, enfeeblement, fear, and bleeding. His dialogue is similar to how the real Shipman would contact his victims' next of kin to inform them of their passing, and falsify medical records that would show his victims were in poor health. However, the woman he's referring to is ambiguous. It could be Edith, the boss of the mental ward who attacks you upon entering her isolation chamber, but more likely it's Alice or even Prickett. Personally, I believe he's referring to Prickett. The line "everyone wants her" in reference to her assuming the form of the pop idol and her being called our hope since, well, She is the one who saves Grim in Ending H if you have her ring. Alternatively, you can die to the kidnapper found at the fountain and be whisked away to the slaughterhouse. Now this area of the game has a whopping 5 nightmare spirits. In the small room with red barrels, Acid Practitioner High will spawn. He is based on British serial killer John High, convicted for murders of 6 people. After being caught selling fraudulent stock shares in 1936, High began to wonder, what if he didn't leave his scam victims alive to accuse him? So, by studying French murderer Georges Alexandre Salé, who disposed of bodies using sulphuric acid, he developed his modus operandi of battering or shooting his victims, dissolving their bodies in acid, then falsifying their signatures in order to sell their possessions or collect their pensions. He was arrested in 1949 after the police found the dentures, among other body parts he failed to dissolve, of his last victim, Olive Duran Deacon. On the 10th of August of the same year, he was hanged. In-game, it's no surprise all of Hyde's attacks are acid-themed, with one even being named after the drums he dissolved his victims in. Hell, even the barrels found in the room in the slaughterhouse could be those very drums. In a particular corridor, you can encounter Corpse Thief Hare. Hare's real-life counterpart is the corpse thief William Hare, who along with his assistant, William Burke, committed 16 murders and sold the corpses to physician Robert Knox. Burke does appear in-game, being summoned if you knock down Hare's health a bit, the two of them committing their killings from November 1827 to November 1828. Their victims usually lodgers at Hare's lodging house, and were murdered while intoxicated. The tendency to get their victims drunk to lower their guard could be why Burke has the Molotov cocktail attack in-game. Yes, different sort of cocktail, but I guess it's a play on words. During the battle, Hare will try and bargain with Grim, offering to pay him off or give you his woman Helen. Of course it's a ruse, but Helen is in reference to real-life Burke's wife, Helen McDougall. She was actually tried alongside Burke and Hare, but was released at the end of the trial. Burke was executed by hanging, however Hare was granted immunity in exchange for providing evidence, and was released from jail in 1879. At a dead end in the slaughterhouse, if you interact with an advice text before a certain corpse, you will be attacked by Repulsive Hindley and Repulsive Brady. If you have the advice text turned off, the 2 nightmare spirits won't spawn, effectively allowing you to skip the encounter. These 2 are named after the Moors murderers, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. The pair killed 5 children in and around Manchester, England between July 1963 and October 1965. The children's bodies were dumped on Saddleworth Moor, hence the nickname of the Moors murderers. However, sadly, only 3 of the victims' bodies have ever been discovered. As well as referencing their victims, their dialogue contains another interesting detail. After taking some damage, Hindley will cry out, "Are you going to keep me in a pig pen for the rest of my life? What about my human rights?" This is in reference to Myra's repeated attempts at being released from jail, including planning an unsuccessful prison escape. However, both she and Brady died in prison serving their life sentences. Upon defeat, the pair drop the Ring of My Struggle, which increases all parameters at the start of a battle. When Brady and Hindley first met, they would spend time reading aloud to one another accounts of Nazi atrocities. And what does My Struggle translate to in German? Mein Kampf. Damn, Thor really did do his homework on this one. Traversing another corridor, this time the one with the pigs and the conveyor, you can run into Fleeing Knight Jim. This is a strange one. There doesn't appear to be any real-life counterpart, at least as far as I can find anyway. NamuWiki lists him as being inspired by a serial killer called Jimmy Jack who killed 25 children and escaped from a mental hospital. Same as Mirahi's wiki. Sure, I guess that matches with dialogue, but searching for this Jimmy Jack yields no substantial matching results. I do have a couple theories about who he could be, however. One of them is Jimmy Governor, an Australian murderer who killed 9 people and was on the run for over 14 weeks, from July to October 1900. The resulting manhunt involved hundreds of police and volunteers during the search. This lines up with the manhunt part of Jim's dialogue, but not the 25 children. The other glaring flaw in this theory is the fact that Jimmy didn't act alone. The initial 5 of his murders were committed with an accomplice, Jack Underwood, and the others were on the run while committed with his brother Joe. If Fleeing Knight Jim was Jimmy Governor, surely there would be a Fleeing Knight Joe and Jack attacking you alongside him, like with Burke and Hare or Brady and Hindley. Though, as a counterpoint, Jim's sprite has 2 heads which could represent Jimmy and Joe Governor. Let me know in the comments down below who you think Clean Night Jim could be. So as a small addendum, one of Jimmy Governor's victims was a school teacher, so I suppose the 25 children could be in reference to his class. But I do feel like I'm kind of clutching at straws a bit with that one. Anyway, moving on. Escaping the slaughterhouse, you can either end up in Billingsgate Fish Market or Cowell River. If you end up at Cowell River, you can encounter Wainwright the Sinful. He takes his name from the real-life Henry Wainwright, who murdered his mistress Harriet Lane in 1874 and hid her body in a warehouse he owned. He became known as the Whitechapel Murderer, as the killing took place in Whitechapel, London, where Wainwright had his brushmaking factory. Whitechapel actually takes its name from St. Mary's Church. Built in London in 1329, whitewash made of chalk and lime was used to paint the outside walls, hence it became known as the Whitechapel. Interestingly, Wainwright the Sinful's armor resembles stained glass windows, specifically the windows of St. Mary's Church. His dialogue references the murder in his hanging in 1875, which was attended by over 200 people, despite public executions being banned in 1868. He was that hated. And also his motive for the murder, financial purposes. Wainwright's brush manufacturing business was going under, and he was unable to support his family as well as his mistress's family. He declared bankruptcy the next year anyway, and Lane's body was found by an associate when Henry attempted to rebury her, leading to his arrest and eventual execution. Alternatively, in the Billingsgate Freezer area, you can encounter Hollow Soldier Christie. He is named after British serial killer John Christie, who murdered at least 8 people during the 1940s and early 50s. His most infamous murders were that of Beryl and Geraldine Evans. These resulted in the wrongful conviction of Timothy Evans after Christie killed his wife in a botched abortion. However, police fabricated a confession, which Evans himself even withdrew after being charged. Timothy would later be found guilty and hanged, having been framed by Christie. In-game, Soldier Christie laments about being looked down upon and belittled. This is in reference to real-life Christie struggles with impotence, which led to him being looked down upon by his peers as an adolescent, acquiring such nicknames as Reggie No Dick and Can't Do It Christie. After murdering his wife and 3 more women, Christie was finally caught when one of the tenants he fraudulently subletted his flat to discovered a hidden alcove in his kitchen. This contained the bodies of 3 of his victims, Kathleen Maloney, Rita Nelson, and Hectorina McLennan. He confessed to all of his murders, including that of Beryl, but not that of Geraldine, and tried to plead insanity but failed and was convicted on 1 count of murder, that of his wife Ethel. Well, 1 murder was enough to get the death penalty anyway, so like 1 or 100 is the same punishment anyway, so that's why he's only tried the 1. Christie was hanged on July 15th, 1953. Before his hanging, he complained to his executioner that his nose itched, to which he responded, "It won't bother you for long." Thank you for watching. Part 2 will continue the journey with all the base game Nightmare Spirits and finish off with the DLC Free Spirits, so stay tuned. Please, comment your thoughts down below and have a great rest of your day.